Bandwidth for Changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean's developer cloud makes it simple to launch in the cloud and scale up as you grow. They have an intuitive control panel, predictable pricing, team accounts, worldwide availability with a 99.99 uptime SLA, and 24/7, 365 world-class support to back that up. DigitalOcean makes it easy to deploy, scale, store, secure, and monitor your cloud environments. Head to do.co/changelog to get started with a $100 credit. Again, do.co/changelog. Welcome to 2020 officially. You are listening to the Changelog, a podcast featuring the hackers, the leaders, and the innovators in the world of software development. I'm Adam Stacoviak, editor-in-chief here at Changelog. On this year's State of the Log episode, Jerod and I look back at our favorite moments from 2019 and forward to 2020 and beyond. We talk through our most popular episodes, our personal favorites, our 10-year anniversary, the excitement we have for Brain Science, our newest podcast. It's for the curious. And we also look forward to plans we have for 2020 and the decade to come.
All right, we are here for State of the Log 2019. It happens to be 2020, but it's 2019's State of the Log. Probably the most belated year-end wrap-up you're going to listen to this year, but listen nonetheless because we got lots of interesting things to talk about. We got a good reason. We got an excuse why we're recording this mid-January. Because December was crazy around these parts, wasn't it, Adam?
Yes, very, very crazy. We shipped a lot of episodes too, even. Like, it was a busy December for in many ways.
It was a busy December, and you were extra busy. You want to share the good news with the listeners out there?
Yes. So we had our newest son in December. December 10th, my son Micah was born. So we're super excited. But it made an interesting holiday, break. December. It's always slower anyways, but that made it even harder because there's so many things I'm doing in November to prepare for the slowdown in December. And for us, it just sped up further in December because, when you have a kid, things get crazy. Like 3 weeks went by and I barely knew what day it was at any given day of the week. Like, is it Friday? Is it Monday? I do not know. If it's even dark outside, because I haven't seen outside in like 3 days straight. Thank God for like grocery delivery and stuff like that.
So we had scheduled to record this sometime in December, but plans fell by the wayside, and so here we are. Nonetheless, we wanted to get a log out there and talk about the year that has passed and some of the episodes, the popular ones, our personal favorites, maybe things happening around Changelog media. Where should we start?
That's an interesting perspective there too, because I'm not sure if we did this last year, but we had debated whether or not this should be State of the Log for the Changelog podcast or Changelog Media proper, because, some people listen to this show and don't know there's other podcasts out there that we produce. And this year was one of those years where we were consistently producing, 5-6 episodes a week, which is really hard to do, to keep that up and to deliver the quality that we always aim to strive for. Thank God for our amazing cast of people that work with us to make all of our podcasts excellent, because you and I alone would fail. So thankful we have such an awesome crew to make what we do so special. And so 200 episodes across all the podcasts is just like, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot of episodes.
46 episodes of the Changelog, and last year we did 47, so we just about hit that mark. I think the arrival of a new child, a good excuse to maybe fall slightly short, but 200 episodes across our entire catalog. And it was an interesting year. It was a lot of work, but I think by the end of the year, we've been operating like a well-oiled machine, if I do say so myself. We're in the groove, we're in the flow, and we're putting out weekly episodes of Practical AI, Go Time, the Changelog, of course, Brain Science every other week-ish, and JS Party every week. And so lots of good podcasts in these different niches that we find so interesting.
I got some stats for you here. They're more, it's just basic math, really, not really stats, but let's just conservatively say it takes about 5 hours of effort to produce one podcast episode, which is
Okay.
probably conservative. It's probably more than that, but let's just say 5 hours because it's round, and that's a conservative number. So if we shipped 200 episodes last year at 5 hours a clip, that's 1,000 hours of effort. And if we divide that 1,000 hours by 24, which is 24 hours in a day, that's 41.666, which I hate 666, but 41.6 whatever.
Repeat decimal.
Yeah, I mean, infinite to end at 7, 41 days, 41.6 days to produce that many effort, that much. And it's probably more than that.
Yeah.
that
Well,
crazy?
you got scheduling, you got recording, you got
Yeah.
lots of the intangibles.
Yes, promotion of it, hanging out in Slack, talking about it. I mean, there's just a lot of effort that goes into producing this amount. So when I guess why I say that is like, it's a lot of work. I enjoy this, but man, it really is a lot of work. And there's something you said on the episode we did with Jeff Meyerson where you were like, it's impressive. I remember you saying this to Jeff. It's impressive the amount of work you do. And so Jeff, a shout out to you for shipping 5 shows a week, bro. I mean, that's like, we feel it. That's a lot. It's a lot of work. So I would say kudos to anybody that decides to podcast, because don't just do it whimsically. Do it intentionally, because this
Right.
it is a tough thing to keep up consistently over many years. And speaking of such, 10 years this year.
That's right. So, yes, we used to ship 1 show a week for
That's right.
a long time, and we felt like that was a lot of work. And Jeff has been shipping 5 shows, software engineering daily. He does a daily show during work days. Takes the weekend off, of course, otherwise he might explode. But he's been doing 5 shows a week, and we worked our way to 5 shows a week, just in a different format. So instead
Yeah.
of doing the changelog 5 times, we have different podcasts, which we like because there's just more voices. And so shout out to all the voices out there on changelog shows. One of the big things that happened was that Go Time came back this year in April. So after a long hiatus, almost a year maybe, coming up on 9 months, I think it was May or June 2018 we hiatused Go
Yes.
Time, and it came back in April 2019. And 6 regular voices on that show now. So love seeing the expansion of that panel. And Go Time has been killing it lately. I love that show.
Yes, that's my favorite. Is the model that JS Party put forward was this model of many voices that I just saw a lot of great things happening with that, and I knew that we had to do the same thing with Go Time, and we were able to, and it's turned out to be a really great show. I'm stoked about that show.
A milestone that Go Time hit this year, as well as coming back in April, is that they shipped their 100th episode this year. I can't remember the exact date that went out, but it was with Rob Pike and Robert Griesemer. Is that how you say his last name? 2 of the Robs, who are creators of the Go programming language, and was a blockbuster episode and has gotten to over 20,000 listens, which is pretty good for Go Time.
Contrast that against episode, I believe, number 3 of the Changelog back in 2009 with Rob Pike. Like during the creation process, the boot up process, the open source boot up process of Go the language. Really interesting, right? Like to be episode 100 of Go Time, a whole different podcast on the same network, and to go to that depth. And instead of just talking about what could be of this language, what is of the language. And that's pretty cool to just have that experience, to be able to be in this kind of trench, that kind of length of time.
Well, Go itself celebrated its 10th birthday this year.
Yeah.
And so we always talk about the changelog growing up alongside GitHub, which it very much did.
Yeah.
But even more so aligned almost on top of growing up with the Go programming language.
Yeah.
I mean, same age. They're the same age. They would be at the same birthday party with the clowns and the balloons. They're having birthday parties.
They might have more clowns and more balloons
I
because
think they probably would have more clowns.
deeper pockets.
I mean,
but whatever.
More balloons.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, to be in this kind of community for 10 years, one, to be a podcast for that many years. We said that on the show we did with Quincy Larson, our 10th, or I guess our 10-year celebration episode. Mm-hmm. But, to be podcasting or have a podcast that didn't die, I guess maybe it did die a little bit here and there, But we'll speak. I think we spoke to that on that episode with Quincy.
It wasn't a dead dog. It was an injured dog
right.
on the side of the road. You don't stop and save a dead dog because they're dead. You can't save them. But when they're injured and they're whimpering, and you see an injured dog on the side of the road, you got to save that dog.
I'm loving this analogy. I really am. So we were an injured dog at least a couple times in our lifespan.
Yes, we were.
But we did last the 10 years so far, and geez, I hope we got 10 more years in us, bro. I mean, I love this community. I love how open source has blossomed over this past 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I love how there's been so much community and so much creation, but so much good for the world. From career opportunities to better products to more safer ways to deliver products, because open source is marginally more secure than, say, code that isn't open to the public to scrutinize or to run security analysis on and stuff like that. And there's so much opportunity out there because of the way of open source. And we've been able to be a part of that and share so many stories of that. And that's so awesome.
Well, you were talking about how much work gets put in, and we want to put that into perspective and say, I was talking with Rachel, my wife, a few days ago, and she was just saying, could you ever have imagined when you were younger that you'd be a professional podcaster or a full-time podcaster? And I was like, no, I couldn't have, because there was no such thing. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to be either Ken Griffey Jr. or Michael Jordan. It was like, am I going to be the best basketball player ever or the best baseball player, in my opinion, ever? I mean, okay, Babe Ruth, but to me, Ken Griffey Jr. was the bomb.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to be, but I couldn't have possibly wanted to be a professional podcaster because there just wasn't a thing. So you've been full-time on Changelog since, I think, 2015, which we even commemorated that and talked about that. And for me, it was just this last year, 2019, that we finally were able to bring me on full-time in September, and it's been an amazing thing. So we do put work in, but we feel very blessed to be able to do this work. And it's one of the greatest things in the world.
It's surreal, to be quite honest with you. It's almost as surreal to say you're a full-time open source software developer. That didn't exist many years ago either. You couldn't aspire to be that, and in the same way we couldn't aspire to be a full-time podcaster of any sorts, And I think that sort of only defines or describes a sliver of what we do. But it's the easiest way to describe it. And I feel very fortunate because it's certainly surreal to tell people when they say, "What do you do?" That classic question, right? What do you do?
What do you say?
I don't have a perfect answer. I should have a better answer for it. It depends on the person, the way they ask, or what my bias might tell me about the person. I might go further, but usually I say I'm a podcaster. I produce podcasts. And then they usually say, for whom? And I say, well, we own and run the company. It's our shows. And I have to explain that too. Mm-hmm. But generally it's, a podcaster.
Didn't you used to tell people you shipped MP3s around the world or something
I still
like that?
Do. I still do. Yeah. The easiest way to say what I do every day is I ship an MP3 across the world. It's really weird. That is a really lifeblood. Weird. That's how podcasts get delivered. I have to tell you this, Jared. You know how this works, man.
I do know how it works.
Right. You wrote the RSS. You wrote the actual code for our RSS feed. You know it intimately. But an RSS feed, MP3 files, globally shipped around the world. Thanks to Fastly for our CDN to make that possible. But wow, it's just so crazy to think that is what I do generally for a living.
Yeah,
it's profound.
So I ran a contract software firm for many years, and so I'm still stuck in that mode of saying that's what I say, and I boiled that down to I do software. That's just what I tell people. What do you do? And I'm in software, and that's usually enough. They're that checks their box, and they don't. Most people ask what you do. They aren't super into the answer anyways. It's a formality unless they're really trying to get to know you. But now I've so used to just saying I do software that I still kind of just say that when people ask.
Okay.
And then I've started to shift to sometimes I'll say I do podcasting, and that's actually usually generates more of a conversation than I do software because people are used to the idea of a programmer or something.
Yeah.
Whereas a podcaster has been just a hobby for so long.
We're like D-celebrities.
Yeah, D-list.
We're like D-list celebrities. I mean, because podcasts, they think of popular, celebrity-esque podcasts because, that the mainstream has popularized for there's no other way to say it, the way podcasting is.
Yeah.
And so we almost get lumped into celebrityism, if that's a thing.
Right.
But very low on the list.
Yeah, we only get recognized at OzCon. and JavaScript conferences.
They're usually disappointed when they say, "Well, what kind of podcast? Can I listen to them?" Yeah, but you probably wouldn't like it. I'm just
I know.
assuming this because we target software developers.
Right. Which is why I kind of am happy about Brain Science.
Yeah.
Because it does reach beyond like just the developer niche
Yes.
to where it's interesting for a more casual or mainstream audience than any of our other shows. And Practically I as well to a different subset, definitely an overlapping subset, but Brain Science is one that I can, point my wife's friends to and say, you might be interested in this, and they would actually be able to get something out of it. Whereas the changelog, I'm just like, yeah, you can go subscribe if you want to like give us one more download every week, but that would just be a favor because you're not going to enjoy the show unless you are actively in software or open source or those kind of things.
Speaking of Brain Science, this is how far out our norm of listenership we've gone. There's a field training officer in Chicago, Chicago Police Department, the greater Chicago area. He reached out to me and Marielle via LinkedIn individually, but said the same thing to both of us pretty much. And he says, "Hey, Adam, I love this episode," speaking to one of the more recent ones on respect, empathy, and compassion. He says, "I love this episode, respect, empathy, and compassion on Brain Science. You and Mario do a great job really explaining the how of compassion." And so like it was interesting to see a field training officer of a police department in Chicago reach out and say that to us because like that's not our typical audience.
That is cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's more examples of that out there.
What's Fastly, Linode, and Rollbar? What are these things at the top of your shows? Right.
Yes. What's bandwidth? What is bandwidth? Is that like time?
Which actually, I mean, inside baseball, but it is a bit of a challenge for us now with a more casual audience. I don't know what you say, a more expanded audience show is like all of our sponsorships are high quality because they're handpicked and targeted at our audience, right? At ourselves.
Yeah.
And Brain Sciences kind of brings a new audience. And so it's like, well, how do you navigate that relationship where you're not going to throw in a Rollbar ad or a DigitalOcean ad to a police officer in Chicago, right? It's not going to help that person.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been the challenge. And that's one of the reasons why we've chosen to actually run that show non-sponsored right now. Yeah. So it kind of does lose money in the economics of the show and production of it. But, I'm a big fan of like, I guess developing an audience before you sort of find a way to monetize. I hate that word. Find a way to sustain it. I hate that word too. I'm just kidding. What word can we use? But the way you can actually enable, what would David Kramer say? That's what I think. How can we get money into this thing to make it go? That's what he would say. Once you got to figure out your audience and the show and the rhythms and things like that. Now you don't have to, but that's the way we've chosen to do it because of that chasm. Because the majority of our sponsors, while they would love to be on that show and support us to do it, in fact, many have even said, "Can we be on it?" And for the reasons that we have of like relevancy, like let's choose to work with and develop partnerships and relationships with brands that are relevant to our audience. I feel like, we've sort of had to say no for now so we can kind of find out what the audience truly is and we can get, much more relevant sponsors for that show.
Yep. Be interesting to see where that goes over the next year or so. Let's talk about the changelog because that's the show that we're on and that's the show that our listeners are subscribed to here. In 2019, 46 episodes, as I said, most popular episodes of the year. We had a lot of great ones as I was going through the list. I was like, not patting myself on the back or us on the back, but I'm like, sometimes you look back and you're like, meh. And other times you're like, that was a good show, Good. And I feel like, as I look through the list, I was pretty proud of what we did last year.
Yeah.
The most popular of which was episode 331. GitHub Actions is the next big thing with Kyle Daigle, of course, the lead of the Actions team. This was back early last year, I think February or March timeframe.
Yeah.
But no surprise that GitHub Actions and a show about it was popular amongst our audience. As we said, we grew up with GitHub, and people have been waiting for a lot of these automation tools and a lot of things that Actions is or has become since the announcement for a while now. And I think there's excitement around this show because there's excitement around GitHub Actions.
Yeah. I wonder, too, if now I'm sure GitHub Actions is super awesome, and the draw to listen to learn more from Kyle and others about this super cool thing is there. But I'm wondering if maybe calling it the next big thing in the title wasn't part of it, too.
Good clickbait on that one.
Yeah, I mean, that really draws you in. Like, is it the next big thing? Let me find out.
Not even is it, because that would be clickbait if we end it with a question mark. We're actually declaring that it is. I think this is your title. You titled this one, didn't you?
I think, like all things are collaborative, so sure, I'll take the credit. Sure.
Yeah.
I titled it.
It's a good title. It's a good title.
I think it was even said to some degree. I think we said it in off air in a funny way. Is this the next big thing? And so we often will like reach into the content of a show to kind of find what the title might be, but stay on point. Don't go and Dan Benjamin it like the way you do some sort of like crazy title that doesn't make any sense. That like, what is this show about?
Well, that's what I do with JS Party all the time.
Yes, and that's cool too. I love that. We should make sure we earmark that, because I like that about our network, is that they don't all take themselves so seriously that it has to be this serious title and make perfect relevant sense for what you will get. It doesn't make a promise. Titles don't always make a promise, especially for JS Party. I like that.
Yeah, it's fun allowing each of our shows to have their own personality.
Yeah.
And have them represent the people on the show and really even the community that they represent. I mean, the JS and web community have so much interesting, weird, zany things in them and people that it's fun to kind of lean into that, so to speak, with that show. But then you get on the AI show and it's definitely more serious. It's one of the things that's happened behind the scenes this year is I've begun to edit more of our shows and get more involved in the post-production. And I actually put out on Twitter a while back when I was editing both JS Party and Practical AI one week, the difference in the audio
and
files.
The cuts, I recall seeing that.
Yeah, because like Daniel and Chris, they have a kind of an every other episode cadence, or they have two kinds of shows. They have an interview show on Practical AI, and then they also have what they call Fully Connected, which is really a news and resources and commentary, just the two of them discussing what's going on in the space. And those shows in particular, they're just very measured, metered. Like Daniel talks for a minute and a half, and then Chris talks for 90 seconds, and then Daniel for 60, and then Chris. And it's just so easy to edit, and it's just back and forth and very smooth. And then you go to a JS Party edit where there's 5 of us and we're all laughing or like, trying to get quick jabs in here or there. You have to like kind of interject to have your turn, and it's like very frantic and messy. So it's interesting just seeing you can see it visually inside of the
show style. Yeah, you can see the way a show plays out differently in the edits by the cuts.
Yep,
for sure.
But anyways, back to GitHub Actions. So since that show came out, of course, back in October, GitHub had Universe and really their GitHub Actions sort of V2 release, which I think makes it even more exciting, which is they've integrated now CI and CD, which is really kind of when it comes time to automate and do actions around your repos, pretty much everybody wanted CI. Mm-hmm. And so it was a very obvious thing. In fact, so much demand that they integrated it into GitHub proper. So, lots moving there. I'm not sure if a lot of people are adopting that or not. Maybe let us know if you've started to use GitHub Actions for your CI, moved off of something else, or if you still see value in a different service, why that is. We'd love to hear from you all. Number 2 most popular episode of last year, Why Smart Engineers Write Bad Code. This is episode 339 with Adam Barr. And again, maybe it was the title that got so many listens, or maybe it was the topic. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting how that one framed out, because it was from a book. I can't recall how you discovered the book. And it was a popular book and had a great title, obviously. So it made sense to borrow the title. I think we just titled
it with the exact same book. I think that is the book's title, or at least the subtitle of the book.
Yeah. And so it would make sense to borrow it because that's the brand of the book. I do agree that, sure, that's one of those things like, do they write bad code? Why? Why are they smart and write bad code? Must find out. Just
so intriguing.
So, yeah.
It kind of does read like a YouTube title.
Yeah, it kind of does. It was a fun show. I was actually quite surprised by that show, though, because I think that was one of the first in a while where we had actually taken like a book and tried to like dive deeper into it. And there was some science behind this, some research from Adam behind this. And, we really got into some of the nuts and bolts of the whys behind this why smart engineers write bad code. And it's actually quite profound. So I would encourage you to listen to it, for one, if you're listening to this, if you haven't yet. So to me, it's not a surprise that one is a popular one in retrospect. But with my pre-site prior to the episode, I wasn't expecting it or thinking it'd be like, oh, this really awesome show. But lo and behold, it was like number 2 of the year. So all that to say, too, I guess more advice for podcasters out there. Take some shots, try something different. This was different for us this year to do that kind of show. We did a couple more around books. I think there's one more in this list that is 2 more in this list
There's
around
2
books.
more in the top 5. That's right. And then another one of your favorites was also around a book. So that is interesting because I wouldn't say historically we've done that very much. But last year, 5 of our biggest shows were all with authors.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times specifically covering the book that they either are releasing or have released. So, which
is why I didn't expect that. And I think that was this one here was the first of the several we did this past year that was around authors and books.
Yep, that was the first one. Well, the next one doesn't have a flashy title, but sometimes you just get the right guest and that's all you need. So number 3 most popular episode of last year, The Pragmatic Programmers. That was a great episode. Probably in terms of nuggets of wisdom, like per second, I think probably that's like the highest value changelog episode of last year. Like listen to that and read their new 20th annual or 20th year edition or don't read it, but listen to that and you can just learn so much from these 2, and I sure did.
Yeah. They have great chemistry too. And so I've spent my entire career knowing, who Dave Thomas is and Andy Hunt is from a name perspective. I've never met them, never spoken to them. I'm not even sure if I may have seen Dave, probably both, speak at Lone Star Ruby Conference, considering their roots, but never met them before. And so it was really cool to finally put a face and personality behind these really famous people in the industry have written, the pickaxe. What Ruby programmer doesn't know? You just say the pickaxe and immediately the book comes to mind, right? And the era of Ruby at that time and Ruby on Rails and the inertia behind the language and framework and building for the web, this whole new lifeblood into building for the web had come because of this era that these 2 camped around. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the Agile Manifesto.
Yeah. And they, like you said, they're both charismatic people and interesting. You could talk to them individually and have a great conversation. But together, I was surprised and delighted by their chemistry and how much they seem to enjoy razzing one another and they bounce off one another's ideas.
Yeah.
And, when you get 4 people onto a podcast, especially in an interview, it's more complicated. It's more difficult to have an interview, first of all, with 2 interviewers, which we do that week by week, so we're pretty used to it. But it is difficult to have 2 people interview 1 person.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to have 2 people interview 2 people because there's conversational logistics, there's all these different things. And with those 2, I felt like the 4 of us had a great rapport.
Yeah.
And I think it comes through on that episode. So definitely one of the better ones. Episode 354, which is the number 4 most popular episode of last year, was recorded live from OzCon, was it not?
Yeah, it was.
This was Ron Evans of the Tiny Go project. The title is Go is Eating the World of Software.
Another one of those clickbaity get 'em titles. You have to.
This was something that he actually said this is like a quote out of the episode.
Yeah.
Can he say that?
Yes.
If software is eating the world, then Go is eating the world of software.
That's right.
Something like that. And he's very good at what's it called when you say a phrase for the first time?
Soundbite.
Yeah, sound bites and coining phrases. He can coin a phrase.
Yes.
And Ron is one of those. Talk about charisma. He's one of these guests that and I say this in the most gracious way. You kind of wind him up and let him go because he's got so much to say. He says it with such enthusiasm, and he's so smart that really, as interviewers, we don't have much work to do. We just kind of lead him in a direction and just let Ron talk. And
Well,
And
the
that's what he
transcript
does.
shows that because it's mostly one-liners from you and I and paragraphs from Ron. So the transcript alone is a visual representation of that effect, you know?
Yeah, and he speaks in such coherent, I can string together 2 or 3 sentences without just like brain farting, but Ron can string together minutes upon minutes of prose.
Yeah.
And they're all coherent. In fact, so much so that I took one of his segments, which he just said off the top of his head about Grace Hopper and what she really meant when she said ask for forgiveness and not for permission. And I just took that transcript and turned it into a post, a changelog post by the same name. And it reads like a blog. Like he wrote, it reads like something I would have written and edited. And he just said it off the top of his head. So very talented in that way. And we should add that blog post to the show notes of this episode because it's a great quick read and some insights on Grace Hopper.
And Ron, I think even prior to that, he was sort of sheltering himself temporarily from the community, not like for reasons, but to focus. And so he like come out of the woodwork with like a lot of profound findings. And he was just like chomping at, I think OzCon was like the first time he'd been out into the community in like months or something like that from what I recall. And so like he was like super amped.
He was.
And that for Ron to be super amped is like double, triple super amped.
So the 5th and the last one we'll talk about, most popular episodes of the year, came later. It came this fall, back to Agile's Basics with Uncle Bob Martin. Of course, this was another one that's focused around a book release. Mm-hmm. And another one focused around somebody who was involved in the Agile Manifesto. And so maybe the theme there of these top 5. And another strong episode with a guy who has a lot of opinions as well.
Yeah. Like Bob, love him or hate him, he definitely is wise about the way we should, could, and do make software. And that's why he wrote the book, of course.
Yeah.
This is one of those ones I wasn't sure, even back to, putting a face, a personality to a name. Bob Martin, Uncle Bob had been, this figure in our community for many years. And I never really followed him well enough to know anything really about him other than he's beloved to some degree and respected quite well and knows what he's talking about. And to finally meet up with him and talk through this book he's written, the most profound thing was really the doubling and the inertia of our community and how the hockey stick and the growth curve of software developers from, say, the 1950s to today. And, this idea that every 5 years, and this is paraphrasing from some of the stuff he said in the show, so definitely go listen to it, episode 367. He was talking about how every 5 years we double. And correct me if I'm off on the stats here, but
fuzzy math, rough math.
Yeah, it was not 100% based on just like pure statistics that he had, but round numbers based on what we do know about the community and its size. So there was some assumptions and there could be some corrections there in order, but nonetheless, the size of our community and then how fast people come in and how long they've been in has just been like this idea of so many more people coming in each year or every 5 years that are still learning, newer to software development, and this idea that there's so much educational need and so much, I guess, wisdom sharing need. That was a really interesting perspective from that show. Mm-hmm. And I think at one point I even joked and said, so Agile is really here to save the world. And you guys both laughed, either pandering to me or being true. One of the two.
Well, it invokes perhaps some delusions of grandeur, but it was well timed and well meant. So that's the top 5 most popular episodes of last year. Let's turn now to our personal favorites. So
yes.
Don't always 1-to-1 with popularity. And most of what we do with the show is kind of follow our own personal interests and hope that our audience is interested as well. And so we've both documented a couple of our favorite episodes from last year. For me, it starts with really the show of the summer for me, and one that probably resonated the most and maybe was referenced back the most as we moved into the fall and winter, which was Adam Jacobs' The War for the Soul of Open Source, episode 353, which was in the run-up to OzCon and was really an unpacked version of his OzCon keynote, which you can now watch the OzCon keynote on YouTube, and I think it's like a tight 12 minutes. Those keynotes, I like how OzCon does their keynotes. They don't do long ones. They stack up a bunch of people, and they'll do 4 15-minute ones or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas our episode with him was over an hour. I think it was 80 minutes roughly.
We couldn't stop talking.
And so it's kind of the director's cut, so to speak. Yeah, we couldn't stop talking. That's the nice thing about a conversation. You can hear a keynote and it's prepared, it's packaged, it has a message, and it's powerful in that way. But usually these kinds of speeches are meant to start a conversation. Whereas on the show, we actually had the conversation with him before he did the keynote.
Yeah.
So it's not really a teaser for a keynote. It's almost like the director's cut, the deep cut.
Yeah. It's almost an either or too. I mean, I don't even know if you'd want to watch the keynote for his charisma on stage and his conviction, not so much, because it's almost shared the exact information to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, if I had known the exact content of the keynote, I would say, like, the order to do it is to go to YouTube, watch the 12-minute keynote, and then come listen to the show afterwards.
Yeah.
I think you get the most out of it that way. But he really has a lot to say around open source and why it is what it is, what it means to him, where is it going, licensing, like all these kind of big picture things. And what's a fascinating conversation, and a great title, The War for the Soul.
Yes. And we made it a little easier too for you listeners. So if you go to the episode, the show notes do have an updated link to his keynote. So don't feel like you have to go to YouTube and search for it. We've already done that for you. It's in the show notes. So go to episode 353 on the changelog, and you will see that's the very first link to Adam's OzCon keynote. So.
This episode is brought to you by Algolia, search technology to power your business. Trusted by Twitch, Stripe, Adobe, and many more. Even us, yes, we use them to power our search, and we love the way they obsess over that developer experience. They let us fine-tune the index for the best results and report back what people are searching for, even servicing search terms that get 0 results, which we love. Check the show notes for a link to get started for free, or head to algolia.com to learn more.
About you, let's go back and forth on these. Hit us with a favorite.
Well, I think I'm basing mine on one. The dude's awesome. Every time I've spoken to Ryan Singer, and I've spoken to him 3 times, like personally, in like my career history, and every time I've spoken to him, I've learned something very profound. Like, it's changed my direction in career, or at least my outlook, my vision, I suppose.
Yeah.
Some on interface design, how I used to like think through interface flows. So in my prior life, you mentioned you were a recent software consultant, ran your own consultancy. Well, in my prior career was also in software, but on a different side of it. I was more in the product side, the product development side, user interface, design, user experience, how to make money from it, maybe even. So there's some economics in there too. So I'd actually paid attention to what Ryan was doing around different interface design styles and workflows for user flows and stuff. So that's where I'd first learned about Ryan. Obviously, he's famous because of Basecamp and all the work he's done and the team has done there. But every time I've spoken to him, I've learned something profound. And shaping, bedding, and building, that episode we did with him and his book, again, a book, that we were very fortunate to have spoken with him like really early on of the life of that book being released. Like barely was the website out, barely was the book out. And I believe it was free to read on the web even. Like, it wasn't even like they were trying to like turn this into a paper book. I think it might have had a paper component, but the point was to share this knowledge. And what's really kind of interesting is that you'd mentioned the Agile Manifesto. Well, a lot of shaping, bedding, and building is about this idea that Ryan had called Shape Up. It's this methodology, which is not Agile, but it's Agile-like. And so we even see people on Twitter arguing whether or not it is or isn't Agile or Agile-like, but it's akin to what we know as Agile, but has this whole other spectrum that is not Agile at all, based on what Ryan has said. So it's kind of interesting to see Bob Martin, Back to Agile Basics. You've got the Pragmatic Programmers, kind of in this Agile world. And then Ryan Singer with Shape Up. And then the side component to that one with David Kaplan on generative engineering cultures, which I'm always a fan of having deep conversations, methodic conversations with people who really know about leading engineering teams. And these two, Ryan Singer and David Kaplan, are definitely those kinds of people. They're leaders in their field. They know how to help, reshape and fine-tune the thinking of cultures and how teams operate to create great products. And that's why they're my favorites for this year. So I picked 2.
Well, I picked 3.
Oh,
so
boy.
I just had to beat you.
Zing.
Or maybe
You got
I
me.
lost because I couldn't actually pick. So I picked 3.
Let me interrupt you real quick. I actually have a third one too.
Oh, okay.
But go ahead.
All's fair.
Continue.
I can name 5 if you want me to. So these last 2 are paired insofar as I met both of these people at Open Core Summit this fall in San Francisco, Devin Zugel and Chris Anderson. And so I loved the episodes we made just recently with the 2 of them. With Devin, we talked about the making of GitHub sponsors, episode 370. GitHub sponsors, I think, is a big deal. Maybe it's the next big thing.
That one had been used, so
Yeah,
we had to go with the making of.
Didn't quite get the same audience that the GitHub Actions one did. So either people are less interested, or it's just a younger episode, or it's all about that title.
Yeah. We'll see.
Devin's a fascinating person. I think she's the exact correct person to be working on this problem. Not that like there should be just one, but let me say she's a great choice as somebody very thoughtful, deep thinker. I love her views into city design and governance and like how you can bring those thoughts over into the software community and use them to our advantage. Just an excellent deep dive into how she came to work on that problem at GitHub, and then also kind of how the team, her and the team, came to where they are and where it's headed. So that's 370.
Yeah.
Love that episode. And then the other one, which I was quite fond of, was Chris Anderson, the old editor-in-chief, I don't know, the old head of Wired magazine, and the creator of DIY drones. And what's the name of his company? Was it 3DR, maybe? 3D Robotics?
Yeah, 3DR.
No.
Yeah.
Is that right? It's not. I get all these drone companies mixed together. I'm forgetting which one it is. I think that's correct. Anyways, the story about how they pioneered open source drones, which is just a fascinating story. Episode 366. And then what Chris was actually more excited about to talk about than we realized, which is his DIY robocars and the proxy war that is robocars, proxying for the autonomous car industry and these different methodologies of how we can get cars to drive themselves. Well, a nice playground for that are these real cheap little robocars. And Chris and his friends are going about building them and trying out these different autonomous strategies. And he is super stoked about it. And that conversation got me excited about it as well.
That was another one of those interesting ones, almost surreal. One, Wired is huge. And to have been speaking to a prior former, however you want to call Chris or define Chris, ex-editor-in-chief of Wired, I mean, that alone was pretty wild. And then diving deep into this story, of this, in quotes, hobby gone wrong. That's so wild. Like at any moment, like that could have not come to fruition for some unforeseen circumstance.
Yep.
But that's not the case, obviously. Somebody, I believe in Mexico, wasn't it, was really excited to work with him, and like we had told some of that story. We're going deep into
his co-founder was a young man in Mexico who he met on the internet, and
multi-million-dollar company.
They built this huge company out of it, and they had never met. Just some crazy stuff that happened there, and super interesting.
It almost listened and heard his story in disbelief. Like, what? How did that happen?
Yeah. It is so hard to believe. It's so amazing.
The other named company was Drone Code. No, that wasn't. That was the open source.
Drone Code was the open source project that came out of it. And it's still being, and it's used now by the federal government. I think the name of his talk at Open Core Summit was something like how we convinced the federal government to use open source drones or something like that. Fascinating stuff. So those are my favorites. A couple of honorable mentions. I love when we get super nerdy. I thought the New Shell episode with Yehuda, Andres, and Jonathan Turner was awesome. I really enjoyed the text mode was this year, right?
Yes.
All things text mode was awesome. Talking
was a
about
fun show, yeah.
your terminal and the shell. I nerded out with the Elixir Talk folks to talk Elixir as well, which was a lot of fun. And so I always love when we get super technical. And we did that quite a bit as well.
Yeah. You ready for my final favorite?
Yes.
I'm going to say one word. Bubba Yaga. I'm going backstage. I've jumped the shark. I'm going to a different podcast because, hey, why not, right? But, yeah, I mean, the backstage we did, and this is kind of like maybe some past. I know the last time we did this, the episode we did with Brett Cannon was one of our favorites, so I can honorably say the John Wick trilogy on Backstage is worth a listen. That was so wild even preparing for that episode because like it had been months where we were talking about watching the John Wick trilogy and catching up, and we call ourselves three diehard fans, and we talk through basically this storyline of John Wick and Keanu Reeves, and the way that became actually does have roots in the change. Like it was in a break long ago where we dove into and haphazardly became really good friends with Brett during a break. We realized he was a cool dude, so I was like,
who would have thought?
We just couldn't help but riff on like Keanu Reeves and our thoughts on different movies he's been in, and that started this idea of like, have you seen the John Wick? And there you go. So Backstage episode number 7, the John Wick trilogy with a special guest Brett Cannon.
So let's talk about Backstage real quick here. As you mentioned it, so this is our podcast, which is not a podcast, so it only lives on the master feed. If you don't subscribe to the master feed, what's wrong with you? It's all of our shows in one place. It's our majestic monolith. And Backstage only exists there. Of course, it's on changelog.com/backstage, but who listens to podcasts at a website? You want to listen in your app. So subscribe to Master, you get Backstage. It's not on a schedule. It doesn't have an agenda. I don't remember what we describe it as, like the inner workings of changelog and other things or something.
Behind the scenes of changelog and surrounding communities.
There you go. So we've just started,
which is still bland. It's not. Still doesn't even describe it. I mean, it's
well, not
there
bland,
is no aim.
But vague. It provides us the opportunity to pretty much record whatever we want.
That's
there.
right.
Guilt free. And so we did about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we did 7 episodes last year of Backstage. Everything from hey, is that Burt Reynolds? Which I don't even remember what it's about. Oh yeah, hot takes from Apple's March 2019 keynote. So some keynote hot takes. I brought Nick Janatakis backstage to talk about changelog platform and Elixir and such things. We were live at OzCon, just the two of us, kind of shooting the poop. That's Dwayne Johnson's movies are actually really educational.
Which is true. That's a true statement.
Which is a phrase that you uttered, and I can't believe you ever said out loud. The John Wick show, like you mentioned, and then I also have had Matt Ryer come backstage to talk about changelog API. Should we use GraphQL to build it? Should we not? Him and I go into kind of the pros and cons of the Go programming language. Matt is one of the panelists on Go Time and a fascinating guy. So if you aren't listening to Backstage and you're not overwhelmed by podcasts, I would put that in your list because it's just fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
And it's infrequent. You're not going to have to make it a regular listen.
It's a bonus. It's a bonus to get these extra special things that you can only get in the master feed.
Right.
And they're not like weekly. They're just every once in a while. And then the ones we've talked, like, this honorable, third special show for me this year, favorite show for this year was the John Wick trilogy, one we did with
which was a blast. It's a long read. 1 hour, 47 minutes.
Yeah, that's
our longest episode ever.
107 minutes. Yeah, that's a long time. That's a long time right there. And then, of course, because we had nowhere else to put it, and we weren't sure if it would make sense to put on the changelog proper, we put our 10 years of changelog with Quincy in Backstage as well. So
that's even longer.
It is even longer. I mean, that's like 3 hours.
Yes.
2.5
So
hours.
if
something
you
like that.
want a deep dive into the history of the changelog, Adam's history, some of my history, first of all, if you don't want that, we totally get it.
Yeah.
That's why it's on Backstage. It's a little navel gazy, but there's some tidbits in there, and Quincy did a great job of diving into our past and really sussing out kind of a changelog story as a commemorative thing for our 10-year anniversary or birthday. And so that's episode 9 of Backstage.
Yeah.
For those interested.
We also flipped the script on Quincy too. So we didn't just ask him to interview us. We interviewed him because he was celebrating 5 years of Free Code Camp, which was actually the title of episode 369, where we talked to Quincy about, which was really profound too, to see his perspective of software education and what he's doing to enable, literally a global community, not just like here in the U.S. or what would be the typical or stereotypical places you would try to plant software education. Places like in China are booming for him. So we talked through a lot of his choices, both personally, economically, et cetera, around Free Code Camp and how it's a nonprofit and what they do to sustain themselves and thrive and plans for the future. That was quite fun too to go through. So we've been really fortunate this year, Jerod. I like these retrospectives to look back and just like see where we've been, to know where we should go, and then I guess pause for a moment of gratitude, because I felt so grateful to work with you so much and so closely as one thing, and then have the opportunity to serve alongside you through such a cool community that is just infinitely multifaceted. It's just so crazy how dynamic this community is and how much love there is out there and how much awesomeness there is out there. And to celebrate those positive things and lift people up and not put them down. I love that about what we do, is that we help people, see the positive sides of things and, detract from and reduce the negative side of things and not be pulled down by them.
Well, let's wrap this baby up by maybe casting forward not too far, just 2020. Here we are, January 2020. What can folks expect from the changelog or from changelog the network over this year? Pick one or two things that we either are thinking about trying or definitely going to do, or things that are in the works or that you would love to see this year for us to go out there and do. What are you thinking?
Well, I'll say the easiest one. This is the easy goal for us, for me and Mariel at least, is to bring brain science to a weekly cadence versus bi-weekly-ish and somewhat inconsistent. So that's easy expectation.
I like that one.
Some harder ones, which are still undefined internally, but should I mention changelog++, or did I already do that?
Well, let's just mention it as a thing that we're actively pursuing, but we're not, we're not going to put a promise on it.
We're shaping it up.
We're not going to ETA it.
Yeah, we're shaping it
exactly.
up. We're shaping it, as Ryan would say.
That's right.
We're going to put some bets out there soon. We're shaping it.
We're shaping.
Go listen to that episode if you want some of these insider baseball terms here.
We might build it. So what is changelog++? Well, it is our take on a changelog membership. Maybe we just leave it at that.
Yeah, no promises out there on what it will be, because we're still working it out. But one thing is just, I guess, finding more ways to, because I'll throw a couple more things out there. We get a lot of people asking us, how can they support us personally and not just, through a sponsorship, through a company or something like that, which is traditionally how we generate revenue to sustain our company. And a lot of people are in this day and age, we talk about a little bit with Quincy, they're okay with and desiring to personally support the things they love. And right now, we don't have an answer to that. And we'd like to find a way, not for us to profit, but for them to take that next deeper step into this community, to call it home, to hang their hat, to be welcomed. They're already welcomed, but it's something with that exchange, that via exchange, that truly lets somebody call someplace a home. And I think that's what we're trying to camp around and drive around. And what that actually is, we're not really sure yet, but it's this idea of giving people a place to call home.
Absolutely. And then for content-wise on the changelog itself, I am excited to continue to go to weird places
yes.
to find the extra nerdy. We have some cool shows planned. In fact, next week is a great show all about Algo, which is a Ansible-based personal VPN. So get nerdy on VPNs. We have an episode lined up all about ScholarRef tools, which I'll just leave it at that. Like, what the heck's a ScholarRef tool? Very nerdy with a guy who's super interesting and is completely not on social media, hosts his own Git. So looking forward to that. We have a show lined up all about laws for hackers to live by. So a lot of the credos and the idioms and the different laws that we talk about and reference all these times have been curated and collected and put into a list, and we're going to talk about some of those. I would love to do more shows that are listener requested. So we haven't been using Ping as much. We did move requests onto Changelog proper, just to better for the workflow. So you can request episodes at changelog.com/request. You can let us know what you want to hear about. You can let us know why you want to hear about it. And we love doing shows that are requested by you, the listener, because that way we know we're serving directly at least one person out there versus trying to guess what y'all want to hear. So more like that. I want to get nerdier. I want to get more obscure. And then, of course, we're always going to be discussing the big picture and the community things going on in the open source and software worlds. So expect that as always. But I definitely want to get into some more technical nitty-gritties over the coming year.
That sounds awesome. I'm stoked for 2020. I'm not sure if I'll hear one more 2020 vision analogies of,
the joke
going into this new decade, but it is a new decade, and that's kind of interesting too. The fact that like it's opened up a whole new 10 years. Like we'll look back at 2029 and say, well, what do we do in 2020? And we'll have this decade-ish retrospective similar to what we've done here. Not quite exactly back 10 years, a little bit.
Only the entire thing will be in VR. We'll just be like, there'll be a virtual software world that we'll be navigating. And you can really make it your home because you can hang out virtually while listening to, I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. But I think by then VR will be back for its third iteration maybe. I don't know. I think it's fallen a little bit by the wayside again.
Well, I think as technology, I'm not even like remotely in VR, but I think as technology keeps evolving, it sort of like pops up again and says, am I good enough? No, not yet. It evolves a bit more. Am I good enough? No, not quite. Well, hey, you can use it for real estate. No, I mean, that's limited. You can tour a home. Okay, that's kind of interesting. But anyways, it seems to like bubble up and ask if it's interesting enough yet. And it's usually kind of, no, not really. And then it goes back. And there's some
and then
cases
it finally
it's really
hits the mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do we really need virtual reality when you actually have reality?
Well, do you want to visit the Louvre, without actually going there? I wouldn't mind.
I suppose, yeah, I guess. VR tourism should be the next big thing. Ooh, we'll earmark that title.
I think they've already been talking about that.
Coming to a future Changelog episode.
We just invented a whole industry, VR tourism.
Yes, that would be cool.
I'm sure they haven't thought of that one yet.
Yeah, well,
anyways.
To the listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you've been a decade-long listener with us, if I ever get to meet you, you will get a hug. Hopefully you're a hugger because I will hug you for listening for 10 years.
And if you're not a hugger, maybe a VR hug.
That's right. Well, maybe just hop in VR just for the hug, a VR hug.
Or just the hugging face emoji.
Yeah.
If that's what you want,
right,
that's what you get.
Well, you pick your hug style. I'll give it to you. How about that? You want an emoji hug or a physical hug, a high five, whatever. The point is thank you. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for allowing us to somewhat entertain your ears, to navigate this crazy world of software, the peculiar, super awesome, amazing people in it. It's just been an honor to do it, and I can't wait to keep doing it. So 2020 is about taking it to the next level, doing it.
The next big thing.
The next big thing is in 2020. All right, thank you for tuning into the Changelog. Welcome to 2020. We are here. We are back. We are going fast as ever. Many shows in the network now. Many episodes coming out each and every week. And the way that you can keep up is easy. Subscribe to Master. It's our majestic monolith. Get this show, Brain Science, Founders Talk, and everything we produce in one single podcast feed. You got nothing to lose. Head to changelog.com/master and subscribe, or search in your favorite podcast app for Master. You'll find it. Special thanks goes out from us to everyone, and I mean everyone, who has helped us along the way. A few names on that list you can find at changelog.com/10. Help us celebrate 10 years of being a thing and 10 more years to come, and more, hopefully. Our music, of course, is produced by the Beat Freak Breakmaster Cylinder, and we're sponsored by some amazing companies. Support them because, hey, they support us. You know Fastly, Rollbar, and Linode have our back. Thanks to them, and thanks to you for listening. We'll see you again soon.